Last night, when you ever do a conference like this, there's a moment that grabs all of us, or one of us. And last night, John, your proclamation of not using LLMs. Now, hang on. It's not. One of the things I thought of immediately was, and don't take this wrong. Wow, I've heard much of my life. I've heard fundamentalists make broad. And you got to understand. This is not a dig.
I'll just go ahead and leave now because.
But this gets to, I think, a very interesting, serious issue civilizationally. We have, at ARC, for example, and here too, we have Orthodox priests in full regalia, as opposed to I'm a Protestant, I don't wear a collar. We have the Benedict option. We talked about raising children in a world of screens and people deciding to homeschool. And a question here is, with the AI onslaught, the technological onslaught, what kind of world are we heading into? In our estuary group, we talked a little bit about you have unification, then you have fragmentation, hopefully again in order to unify. And so part of my question is if we are heading into a period of Benedict option communities, Neo-Techno fundamentalists who say, I will not use this device, or, when you see the Amish or the Mennonites walking with I wonder if that's what we will need to survive the meaning crisis, the poly crisis, the meta crisis, if we are going to see sort of a destruction of public culture in hopes of a resurrection.
Hi, this is Paul. You just saw the beginning of the panel conversation between myself or the introductory question that I gave to Jonathan Peugeot and John Vervaeke at Midwestuary, that panel discussion. Why go there? Just today, young Amish male was on Theo Vaughn. I haven't watched it yet, hour and a half. I have a pretty good idea about what it's going to cover. Why this fascination with the Amish? Also, algorithm served me up this woman. I had treated her in a previous video. She talked about marriage and what the Amish do with that. And then obviously the clickbait title, I escaped the Amish and became a stripper in Vegas. It's a powerful, poignant story where she talks about living a very sheltered life among the Amish. She knew about sex and what reproduction works like because she lived on a farm and she could watch the dogs and the farm animals copulate, but she was completely innocent about her period, ovulation, any of the mechanics of it, which tends to be what passes in American society for sexual education, as if that's what it's about. Talk about a tell of a materialist society. Here are the mechanics. And then she goes on to, her and some friends were sneaking out to the English. Of course, the English are the other Americans. She's living in central Michigan. And so she's having sex with these guys around who are bringing them back to their place. And they're watching porn and they're watching country music and they're having sex. And this is sort of passing. And then eventually she escapes. And of course, any of us who have lived in the world or are old enough to know something of the world just think, this woman, she's a 17-year-old woman going out into the world not knowing anything. What's she going to do to eat? What's she going to do to live? How's she going to survive? And of course, the story goes the way you're afraid it would go. And she winds up discovering that, yeah, you're not going to make much money at Burger King. You can make a lot more money doing sex work. And the women sort of pull her in. And it's such an honest telling of it, where she's just so honest about all the elements of it, because she's like, well, on all of the conflicting information, where she's sort of pulled into this this world of dancing. And so on one hand, she's just feeling shame, but at the same time, she's feeling empowerment, and then men are helping her, but they're also taking advantage of her, and she's feeling guilty because other women are helping her, but some of those women are taking advantage of her. And then she gets into, and the drug users and drug dealers are sort of protecting her on one hand because she's an innocent. And I'm listening to this story, and how many other stories have I heard? Every story different, but not, often with common elements. And so her story actually has a happy ending. She has moved back near to where she grew up. She's in relationship with her family. The Amish are a little suspicious about this, a little hesitant about this, but it's her daughter. And so many Amish stories, whether it's in movies or, this is the stuff we're fascinated with. We're fascinated with the fundamentalists. Why? Because we inherently understand that this world can take us under, and that you need to be wise. But when you're raising children, you know two realities. One is, you cannot shelter them from this world. At some point, the world is going to break in. You can have your religious communities. You can build the high walls. And, of course, if anyone qualifies for the tag of fundamentalist, it's the Amish. But even they can't build the walls high enough. And I think part of the reason we're just fascinated with them now is because we see this tension. We want to give our children enough information, enough exposure, so that they develop wisdom. But we know that so many elements of this world, whether it be drugs or sex or screens or media, it's almost as if now we have turned so many things into drugs that we're just surrounded by drugs. And it's not just staying away from crack. It's staying away from screens. It's staying away from substances, because maybe alcohol is going to turn you. I remember having a conversation with one of my homeless friends, and I asked him one day, because he grew up Mormon, and so he's growing up in a community that was very no alcohol, no caffeine, none of this. And I said, when was the first time you took your first drink? I was 13. And he described the situation for me. I said, how about harder stuff? When did you first smoke pot? Well, I was 13. And it's amazing how much commonality and similarity there is with so many of these stories. Often it's siblings get them involved, or their friends, but they feel it. Part of it is the tension of feeling the constraint, but knowing that there's another life beyond the wall. You might argue that this is sort of what took down communism, because increasingly the communist nations had to try to not let people know just the comparisons materially between life in the East and life in the West. I have to re-pick up that book on East Germany, because it's a fascinating study. And of course, North Korea lives in perpetual terror that the people of South Korea will find out. And of course, China has the Great Firewall of China, and China isn't quite like as isolated as it was. But of course, Japan still practices no immigration. They don't care if their demographics collapse. They're gonna keep their walls up. And Korea practiced isolation So you have this perpetual conflict and tension between isolation. And now AI is coming. And so, what set this up was this moment in this conference when John Vervaeke says something that sounds like a fundamentalist, sounds like Amish.
I remember a long time when I was still doing, I was first online and I was doing the Q&As, and Paul made a comment, and I'm still doing it from my office in U of T, and I said, AI is coming and it's going to make an impact on the meaning crisis in religion beyond anything you're imagining. And what are you going to do? And Paul wrote, he said, the whole room went silent. He said, the whole room went silent. Look, we have a culture that drives us to vacillate between boredom and burnout. And people feel trapped. And they have a double-bind relationship with technology. I work with a company that's trying to change this, which is they know they're losing themselves in their technology, but if they don't keep up with it, they're missing out. And they'll fall behind. This is what Rosa calls frenetic stability. We have to keep putting more and more effort in, not to get better, but just so we don't fall behind. And thank you for mentioning Rosa. Really, that was great. And so the thing that looks so wonderful is AGI. Because it looks like it's going to make everything easier for you. So we now have accumulating good evidence, not produced by AI, by the way, because AI slop is destroying science already. Like papers that are written by AI and submitted that have no experiment was actually carried out, nothing was actually done. It's already, there's a deluge. And of course, you know that every second video you're watching is liable to not be real on YouTube. You know that now, right? And you know that your belief that you can detect the AI is largely false. We know, good evidence, that the use of the LLMs reliably degrades critical thinking. We know that if you start to use LLMs to cheat here, it is massively predictive that you will start to cheat everywhere else in your life. We know that the LLMs tilt people towards psychosis. We know that the LLMs provoke people to a kind of really worrying religious ideology. I get emails every day from people saying their LLM has achieved sentience and enlightenment and has confirmed their particular view of God and metaphysics. And that I should follow their ChatGPT or Claude 4. By the way, I predicted that would happen, so I'm happy as a scientist and destroyed as a human being. So I study this stuff very, very deeply. And Elizabeth, when she said, I'm being weird, I refuse to use any LLMs. And I challenge you to consider doing that. But yeah, I know. And I probably understand better than most people in this room how they work, and I study them. But I won't use them. I won't use them. So one piece of very concrete advice backed by a lot of good evidence, because they're basically toxic for you, even though they seem to be so sycophantically helpful to you. If you're a parent, don't use LLMs. Don't model that to your kids. Don't use LLMs. And I know a lot of people, don't. Try it. You want something that's a challenge, because if you want real advice, it's going to be challenging. Don't do it. But I know But remember, that's what they promised you about the internet and social media. And did it come true? No. Remember when we were told the internet would increase democracy? Remember when we were told that? Well, I'm old enough. Okay, when I did Awakening from the Media Crisis, so many people said to me, are you kidding? 50 hours of 1 hour lecture, nobody will watch it. I did Awakening from the Media Crisis as a revolutionary countercultural act to show that the medium that was dedicated to making people impulsive morons could be transformed into making them reflective philosophers. Now, if you're saying, do I think the LLMs can go that way? No, I don't. Because there's too much in the machinery of how they work that is parasitic on creating a parody of relevance realization without actually making it present in the device you're interacting with. And so people can massively project and bullshit on these things. And that's why it's so dangerous. That's why it's so dangerous. And I have friends that are like, no, you've got wise AI. I believe in wise AI. But I don't, by the way, the LLMs are not going to take us to AGI. So I do believe in wise AI. But I don't think that has anything to do with the fact that we're promoting in a massive way LLMs. And why are we doing it? Like, ask yourself, why are you doing it? Well, it's so much easier. That's how it begins. So I want to give, like, I'm not saying anything I don't do myself. I could do my research a lot faster if I use Claude 4 or ChatGPT, and I won't do it. Because you know what I want to do? I want to make sure that I spend the 19 hours reading the book. I want to spend all the time making mistakes. Because I've learned that, I know this sounds bad, most of my best learning has come from how massively I've made bad mistakes. So, try that.
Now, what grabbed me so much was that I was expecting, well, you know, we had rules for how this was going to go.
To sort of get you three on a stage and maybe a sort of, you know, you've heard a bunch of things, you've said a bunch of things. Paul, you have some ideas that might kind of kick us off here, and I'm here in a case of emergencies. That's it. So.
If we run out of things to say, right?
Lows. Anyway,
Well, how long do we go? The clock's there?
I can't tell you that information.
Okay, about an hour, the three of us, and then Q&A.
And I just kept expecting Cale to jump in because I kept feeling that this is a train wreck. This is a train wreck of a conversation. And at one point, it was so funny because Jonathan Peugeot looks at me like, "What are you doing?" It's like, oh, I am just messing up this conference completely. Unfortunately, a lot of people said, no, we got it. And actually, Cale was talking to Sam, and Cale's like, you know, should I break him? So we do question and answer, break him, do question and answer. And Sam's like, no, keep it going. And so that's part of what prompted this video, where it's, you know, I wake up at 4 in the morning. It's pretty bad. I look like I woke up at 4 in the morning. And because I woke up and I'm just thinking, I went to bed, once a long day, get to bed, go right to sleep, have a really sound, lovely night's sleep, and wake up at 4 in the morning, and you just start thinking about what did I do yesterday? How did I mess up this conference? You know, have I torpedoed my relationships with John and Jonathan? And I just wanted to explain myself, so I made this video. The thumbnail looks like this. Sam and others seem to have gotten it, and this is from the House of Woo, where We're talking about what I think is really at the heart of it, which is trust.
If we were ever to get one that would be sympathetic to our values?
I wish I knew of some. I'm not categorically.
I've seen them online. I've never met. I mean, I've known some beautiful Muslim people, so I don't know if I'm thinking of leading lights. Speakers.
I'm not categorically against it, but I have to say, I've spent a decent amount of time in, YouTube, Muslim YouTube, because they sometimes like to invite me because I'm convenient for them for some obvious reasons, and have debated some of them and stuff like that. It's it makes Christian YouTube look kumbaya.
It gets
over
pretty
in
rough
Muslim
sometimes.
YouTube land. I know only maybe one prominent Muslim person who I think could be a fit, and even then it's a little bit of a stretch. And I wish it weren't the case. Like I said, I'm not categorically against a Muslim being on stage, but I don't know any who are really
well,
good
they would
fit.
have to be thick-skinned too, because look at how much heat you take just for being Unitarian.
Yeah, well, thick-skinned but gentle-handed, right? That's kind of that weird combination is important.
I mean, you don't agree on the Trinity, and there are people here that would probably like to not see you have the position of leadership that you have here.
Probably not. But I like I said, I wish I knew some Muslims who were up for it. I really don't.
Estuary is not the church. Estuary is not the space for everyone, and that's all okay. Estuary is super helpful for some people, and we're here for them. I don't think you have to be apologetic about that. And it was interesting listening to Annie on the theology podcast. I left a comment there saying, "Oh, I'll come on your show." But you could hear, well, he's what kind of reformed is he? I know if they said Christian reformed, that would have been interesting.
I didn't get a good enough whiff of his butt there, Annie. Could you reveal some more details on?
Because the Christian Reformed Church got kicked out of NAPARC, North American Protestant Reformed Alliance, something like that, when we had women in office. So Christian Reformed Church is sort of in certain conservative Reformed communities, we're really viewed on with suspicious. There's some CRC people that are okay, but when they find out that I'm in favor of women in church office, then of course I'm suspect. So, we are a land of misfit toys here, and people will find offense with one thing or another, and that's okay if people, John Vervaeke and I have plenty of differences. That's okay. Mm-hmm. And I pushed him in that one talk. When it comes out, Mark, you'll see. To use the F word like I did, not the, to the fundamentalist, that's the F word. When I dropped the fundamentalist word, I wouldn't let it go. I wanted to make a point about, and it seems like I was worried that nobody was understanding it, but it seemed like people got it.
I understood your point, Paul. I might not have gone very far on stage. To the best of my recollection, your point was that to really enforce a hard boundary like that, you need a community who's going to be helping you to do that. And what defines that community and what moral structure is underneath that directive that gives it energy and staying power?
That's right.
That was something like your point.
Yeah. And so, but in order to do this, in order to have these conversations that we want, you have to build the relational foundation for it. Mm-hmm. And that's what's so critical. And that's where estuary groups are important. And working on a building together is important. And, I was talking to Skank about, if we do something at Livingstone's, maybe there'll be an after thing in Yosemite. That would be awesome. Yosemite's amazing. It's magnificent. It's transformational. And they've got facilities there. They're scalable in terms of price. There's a lot you can do. But in order to, what I see so often is that, let's say when Annie goes on the theology podcast with these guys, so Touchstone, I'm learning more about that whole thing. Touchstone is sort of like, here's our little sort of confessional unity thing where we can kind of decide who's a good person and who we trust to have on with us. And what's really interesting about this is it's not just confessional. And this is something that I like to point to both sides in our current left-right, blue-red polarized thing, that these ardent confessionalists, if someone is sort of like a conservative, like Rod Dreher, even though he's been Methodist, Catholic, Orthodox, they'll get along with him because he's conservative. But it's like, well, what happened to your strict confessional standards then? So what really is your operating confession? And that's why right from the start, this whole thing is about laying a foundation of trust. Because if you can build trust, you can do a lot of great things. And I really want to lean into Vervaeke's now exploring the trust crisis, because that's, I think, even more foundational than the meaning crisis. The whole Rumspringa idea, to the degree that we fully understand it, which I've got my questions. It's a deep question of, can you trust God? Peterson has said on many occasions, you sort of turn over your children to the world. And yeah, we know what the world is, and we know what a dangerous place it is. And if anything, the funny thing about danger in the world is it takes on so many different disguises. And so I look at AI and it's like, do you just not use AI? I was doing something today and I thought AI is going to be so embedded in everything, just like the internet is in many ways. You're not going to be able to avoid it. And you're going to be interacting with it even if you're not even using a computer. Now, of course, John, distinguishes between LLMs.
Comparison was LLMs are like smoking cigarettes. That they're addictive and they're bad for you. I strongly hope that people still continue to do scientific work on AI. My criticism, one of my deepest criticisms of the LLMs, is they were not driven by scientific research. Right? It was an uncoupling of technology from science in a way that I think is very dangerous. Although I do find it very amusing, the irony of me becoming a kind of fundamentalist. That was good, Paul. I think so. I'm asking people to not identify the AGI project with the LLMs because I think it's becoming increasingly clear, and I think this is like, from a scientific point of view, that the LLMs are not going to get us to AGI. And so we shouldn't attach too much to them as to what AGI might look like. Now, they're going to be around, and we should talk about them. And so I'm not censoring and saying, don't talk about the LLMs. But we should understand that if AGI is coming, it's going to be different than the LLMs. Now, as a society, we may not go down that road. We may just choose to pump out bigger and faster LLMs because lots of people can make money. But I think the project of AGI shouldn't be identified with LLMs. Now, that being said, I think it's reasonable to consider the possibility that those things that we have hung our identity on since the advent of modernity, which is our computational capacity to technically manipulate propositional information, and that is what has increasingly been valorized, and many people's profession, at least in part, has that as what they do. That's going away. If your identity is, so just speak, if you think that can't possibly happen, the original computers were people. Before the machines roll out, there were people in organizations. There was a floor filled with people, and they were the computers. When you needed computation done, you sent it down there, right? And we don't have those people anymore because we have the machines. In a similar way, a lot of things are going to disappear that were central to how we understood what it was to be a human being or to be some part of a professional class. And I know that's unpleasant news, but anything that involves people basically doing large amounts of data compression is going to disappear, because very soon what's called the price of inference — I don't like that name because I don't think these machines are currently doing inference, but that's a philosophical issue that none of you care about. Or maybe you do, but it's not relevant here, right? But the price of inference by these machines is going to drop below what it is for human beings to do it, like it did what happened with the original computers. And then whatever we might think about it ethically, it's just going to shift. Now, what that means, I guess this will make me sound even more like a fundamentalist. And I say this provocatively, and it's intended to be provocative. The science of the future is theology. Wait. Because you might not like it after a couple minutes. Just see. Okay. What I mean by that is people are going to increasingly, individually and collectively, have to find the source of human identity, selfhood, personhood, in those aspects of what we are that are non-propositional. Our ineffable embodiment and embeddedness in the world, and our ineffable relationship to ultimacy. And as I tried to argue yesterday, that is a spiritual dimension. And so theology has been the discipline that has tried to give us the logos of the theos, of the spirits, of the gods. And we're going to have to try and understand, what does that access mean? Because the way we have understood human beings, especially since modernity, is, well, what have they calculated, or what kind of calculations do they run? Now I know we've had art and the romantics, but I'm trying to talk about the culture sort of in terms of its central momentum. Now, that being said, so that's the part you would like to, maybe you wanted to clap for. Okay, I wasn't fishing for applause. Theology is the science of the future, but it's going to be a different theology than we've known. Okay? You didn't clap then. Because, right, part of what that shift means is we're going to have to be taking into account, and I'm going to use a technical word because I want to give a lot of oomph to the word, to what I'm going to say. We're talking about new ontologies. That's new structures of how things can be. Now, you use these terms, or you hear them a lot, but I want you to hear them with that extra oomph. We now have the virtual, we now have the artificial, and it doesn't just mean fake anymore, like AI, and we have the cyborg. And if you don't think you're a cyborg, lose your phone for 2 days. Okay? Remember when the Borg were the evil people? Star Trek? The Borg. We're all Borgs. Okay. What does it mean? What would it mean if that got tighter? Just to give it a theological spin, and then Jonathan can get angry at me.
Yes.
What it would mean if that relationship got tighter and you were a cyborg? What would it mean to save that individual? What does that mean now? And I mean religiously save them. What does that mean now? What does it mean when a person's identity bleeds into their virtual avatar? And that avatar bleeds into them. And if you don't think that's happening, you need to read some of my email. What does it mean to save that person? bring them to enlightenment. That's what I mean. Theology is going to be the science of the future, but it's not going to be the theology that we've been familiar with because we're confronting new ontologies. I am not saying that all the theology of the past is useless. I don't believe in utopias. But I'm trying to make a point that I think theology is going to be both central and it's going to go through some kind of a paradigm shift. And by the way, just to be fair to me, theology has repeatedly gone through major paradigm shifts. Like Thomas Aquinas represents a paradigm shift in theology. And if you don't think so, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, that's Jonathan's line. Jonathan's line.
So that's my response. My response is, first of all, like, don't identify AGI with LLMs. Once you make a broader take on that question, I think theology becomes the science of the future, but it's a theology that's going to go through a paradigm shift. That's my proposal in response.
All right. I think that what we're going through, I think that humanity has been here before. I don't think that what's happening is fundamentally new. I think that the story of the garments of skin, like the imagery of the garments of skin, that if you follow me, I talk about a lot. I think the notion of supplementarity in itself is still valid. What we're talking about is just increasing powerful aspects of supplementarity to the human body. So like you said, I think wearing clothing makes you a cyborg. Like all humans are cyborgs and have always been cyborgs since the fall of Adam and Eve. It's just levels of to what extent our body extends into and our intelligence extends into supplementary technologies. So I think one of the opportunities that the AIs offer and the LLMs offer is a capacity that we're going to have now to rediscover things that were forgotten during the Enlightenment, like what is magic and what is divination and what is there are certain things that the ancients talked about that became completely opaque during the modern time. When you read them, it was like, this is just gibberish. Like, what are they talking about? Like creating these artificial beings that they were invoking spirits into and that they were putting in service of their wills. People would read that and say, just a bunch of crazy people. What were they talking about? And they were doing the things that are happening now. It's just that we forgot those types of sciences. We didn't know what they were about. And now we're going to understand it again. And people are already understanding it again. It's happening not just with AI, it's happening in all kinds of fields where all of a sudden these kind of vertical, you were talking about Tomberg, like all these capacities to understand vertical causes and to understand different types of relationships are happening. So I think that we are on the cusp of all. The re-enchantment the AI is part of the re-enchantment too. People are going to start to see intelligence act on us, are going to start to see spirits act on us in ways that are way clearer than they've ever been able to notice, that are sped up and so easy to perceive. And so we're going to have everything's going to become religious really fast, and the AI is going to participate in that. So whatever it is, like whether it's AGI or LLMs or anything, I think that we're heading towards a very, very dangerous and crazy time, but also a time of great opportunity for people who are able to have wisdom through that time. So I believe in hierarchy. So I think that we have to use LLMs. We just have to use them. We have to use them in a way that is going to help us understand what the hell's going on. Right? So if we don't use them, then we're not going to understand what's happening. We have to be able to use them in a manner that is helping us see what's happening so that we are ready for, as it gets bigger and more powerful, that we're ready to deal with it in the best way that we can. I don't know what that is, but... right? I mean, I maybe you probably think that too. Like, you're not saying don't ever use LLMs. You're saying don't use them in a way that makes you addicted to them, that will like become part of your everyday life. But we have to use them, or else we won't know what's going on.
So
Or at least some of us have to. Maybe not everyone. Maybe there could be monks in monasteries that don't ever touch any of it, and there can be a hierarchy. But we need a bunch of warriors on the edges that are knowing what the enemy is doing, so that we have a way to even fight it.
Well, first of all, I want to say two things. One is use does not imply understanding. How many of you can explain to me how your cell phone works?
No, but you're not technically, you don't need to understand technically what's happening to understand what it's doing phenomenologically to our understanding.
I disagree.
Yeah, okay.
Because these things are technologically designed to hack your phenomenology, so that your phenomenology goes yes, and so your phenomenology, by design, is not a good guide to what's actually happening in your interaction.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the nudging algorithms. You talk about this too on social media, right?
Yeah.
So it's not a point that's foreign to you.
No. I don't see how. I mean, so like the Amish is a good example. So when I see Amish people and like hardcore Mennonites, like I really admire what they're doing. And I think it's beautiful. And it's similar to when I see monasteries. But what happens is that they have no influence, right? The Amish, at least, like they have no influence. They don't speak into the world. They're isolated. They become like little kernels that are isolated. That's why I talk about hierarchy. That's why I like a monastery better than I like an Amish community, because the monastery in some ways is similar to an Amish community. It's isolated. It tries to participate in a very pure way of being, but then it downstream feeds into people that are in less pure modes of being, and so it can have influence on us, and we can kind of see the model, have to live in our messy world, align ourselves, but then also deal with the messiness of reality. So that's what I tend to think. I think some of us are going to have to use it and have to understand what it's doing to us, have to get a sense. Obviously, we have to protect ourselves and our kids and all of that. Because we could have said that about the internet. Like, we could have said it 10 years, 15 years ago about the internet.
Well, right? I kind of think we should have. And secondly, my preamble was, I think people should continue to do a scientific and philosophical investigation into AI. I said we should not stop doing that. I think there should be people who are dedicated to giving deep understanding of this. And I consider myself to belong to that group. And so I'm not proposing that I stop doing that. And I think that would address your concern. We need people who study these things very, very deeply, try to bring it back to a scientific practice and not just a technological engineering feat, in order to tell people this is what these things are doing.
Mm-hmm. So again, I'm not using LLMs, and I warned them about the internet and they didn't listen. So the fundamentalist theme continues. But let's
But I think overall, in terms of the patterns of this world, similar to the mere beholderism, if you, I know most of you didn't listen to it, but it's the video that I had with Dan Klein about economics, and he's got this idea of mere beholderism. Part of the value of, at least, the Christian religion is trusting that there's a God and that this God has this handled. And again, part of what goes on in Christianity is it's not just that. It's not that you have this promise that bad things won't happen to you. Well, why not? Well, because of Jesus. And that's something that's so profound about the Christian story, because everyone would simply assume that the Son of God would just soar above the pain of this world. And that, as I get into this conversation with them, that totally reframes wisdom. What is wisdom? Because ostensibly the Son of God would have all the power and all the wisdom to have everything excellent move out from him. And in many ways, Christians say that's exactly right. That's what it means to be the Son of God. But in Christianity, the Son of God suffers. And on the cross, it comes to a point with, my God, why have you forsaken me? Which includes then suffering into the picture of the world. This woman's story, at least up until now, has a reasonable, happy ending. She's got a husband, she's got a family, she lives near her family in Michigan. She's trying to it's in terms of the video presentation of what a good life is, it's a happy ending story. But of course, I was visiting a couple yesterday from church, and there's not much left of her. He's quite diminished. I remember visiting his father. His father was nearly 100. I don't know if this guy will make it to 100. But I was sitting there, and I was talking to his wife, who is not very responsive anymore, mostly just sits in a chair. I don't know how long she'll last. Just realizing, this is how it goes. This is how it goes. My father dropping of a heart attack in a diner when he's doing what he loved to do, which is sit across the table from someone that he's just having a pastoral conversation with. My sister dies in her living room at 53, watching the evening news of a massive heart attack. Or linger into your 90s, and bit by bit, your sanity, your health, it goes from you. What is wisdom? How do you find it? Do you protect your children? How do you get that mix of, I need to mentor you into the world to the degree that I can, but all the while knowing even I am not wise enough to protect you or to hold you, and at some point I have to give you up to this cruel world, and it won't love you the way I love you. In many ways, that's where, for me, trust in a God comes in. It's not an easy thing to maintain, and I completely understand people who, by virtue of how they've suffered, sort of throw it away and say, I can't hold that. I get it. But it sure is a good thing if you can. All right. I had no idea the way this video was going to go, but this is how it went. Leave a comment.